Admiral Steve Parker stood in the war room at Earth Command looking at the big holographic map that showed how human culture was spreading fast across 12 star systems. What had started as a simple sharing of culture with the Zephyrians had grown into something that had never happened before in galactic history. "Give me your report, Colonel," Parker said to Colonel Nancy White, who had just come back from a scouting mission to the outer space territories. "Sir, it is beyond anything we thought could happen," White began, her voice mixing wonder and worry. "The Zephyrians have shared human cultural files with the other species in their confederation. The Mordak war clans have stopped their ritual fighting ceremonies and replaced them with what they call emotional battles, using human-inspired music and poetry." Dr. Frank Rodriguez, Earth's top expert on alien cultures, stepped forward with more data. "Admiral, we have confirmed that at least 8 species in the Confederation have completely changed their social structures after being exposed to human creative expression. The rigid class systems that have controlled galactic civilization for millions of years are starting to fall apart." The holographic display showed communication intercepts from across the Confederation. Species that had kept the same social orders for thousands of years were experiencing what could only be called cultural revolutions. The logical Caethani had developed abstract art forms that celebrated chaos and unpredictability. The military-focused Vorthak had started composing what they called war songs that expressed the emotional cost of fighting rather than celebrating victory. Captain Julia Morgan, recently returned from a diplomatic mission, provided more context. "Sir, they are not just copying our cultural forms, they are transforming them into something uniquely their own. The Zephyrians have created musical instruments that use their natural crystal resonance abilities. The Mordak have developed a form of combat dance that expresses aggression through artistic movement rather than actual violence." Admiral Parker studied the reports with growing unease. "What is the Confederation leadership's response to these changes?" Colonel White's expression became dark. "That is where it gets complicated, sir. The older generation of leaders are terrified. They have ruled through rigid control for millions of years, and suddenly their citizens are questioning everything. Some systems are experiencing what can only be called civil unrest, but it is unlike anything in their history." Dr. Rodriguez pulled up more data showing the psychological profiles of various alien species. "The fascinating thing is that they all seem to have hidden creative abilities that their societies suppressed. Human culture is not creating something new in them. It is waking up something that was always there. However," Captain Morgan added, "the younger generations across all species are embracing these changes enthusiastically. They are forming interspecies cultural groups, sharing creative works across traditional boundaries, and developing entirely new art, forms that blend multiple alien perspectives with human concepts." The Admiral reviewed reports of concerts where Zephyrian harmonics mixed with Mordak rhythmic chanting, and human melodic structures, poetry circles where Caethani logic was combined with Vorthak emotional intensity, and human narrative techniques, visual art that used the sensory abilities of 6 different species into multi-dimensional experiences that no single species could fully appreciate alone. "What is our current diplomatic status?" Parker asked. "Mixed," Morgan replied. "The Confederation's ruling council has demanded that we stop all cultural exchanges and provide what they call containment protocols to stop the spread. However, their younger populations are sending independent requests for more human cultural materials. We are receiving thousands of transmissions daily from individual aliens asking for music, literature, and art." Dr. Rodriguez highlighted a particularly concerning development. "Admiral, we have also discovered that this cultural exchange is affecting us. The human crews working with the Confederation have been exposed to alien perspectives on creativity and emotional expression. They are returning to Earth with expanded concepts of art and music that incorporate alien sensory capabilities." Colonel White nodded. "It is becoming a true cultural fusion, sir. Neither fully human nor fully alien, but something entirely new." The reports showed that human artists were now creating music that included harmonic frequencies only Zephyrians could hear. Human poets were writing verses that incorporated the mathematical logic structures that Caethani found beautiful. Human visual artists were experimenting with colors and patterns that existed in dimensions most humans could not perceive, but that other species found deeply meaningful. "Sir, we are also receiving reports of unauthorized cultural exchanges," Captain Morgan added. Independent traders and explorers are sharing human cultural materials with species outside the Confederation. The spread is becoming completely uncontrolled. Admiral Parker pulled up a communication from the Galactic Confederation's High Council. The message was formal and threatening, demanding that Earth immediately cease all cultural contamination and provide assistance in returning their species to their original states. They are calling it cultural contamination, Parker said grimly. But look at these other reports. He displayed messages from individual aliens across dozens of species. Young Zephyrians begging for more human music. Mordock warriors asking for human poetry that helped them understand the emotional complexity of their own experiences. Kithani philosophers requesting human literature that showed how logic and emotion could work together. Dr. Rodriguez analyzed the psychological profiles further. Admiral, the species that are embracing human culture are showing increased problem-solving abilities, enhanced emotional intelligence, and improved interspecies cooperation. The traditional Confederation leadership sees this as a threat to their authority, but the actual effects are overwhelmingly positive. What about the reports of civil unrest? Parker asked. Colonel White clarified, "It is not violent revolution, sir. It is more like mass civil disobedience. Citizens are simply refusing to follow the old rigid rules. They are forming their own cultural groups, creating their own art, and making their own decisions about how to live their lives." The most remarkable development was happening on the Confederation border worlds. Species that had been enemies for centuries were now collaborating on artistic projects. The shared experience of human-inspired creativity was breaking down barriers that military force and diplomacy had never been able to overcome. "Admiral, we are facing a choice," Captain Morgan said. "We can try to help the old Confederation leadership contain this cultural spread, potentially destroying something beautiful that is bringing growth and peace to the galaxy. Or we can accept that we have started something that is bigger than any of us and try to guide it responsibly." Dr. Rodriguez added more data. "Sir, the mathematical models suggest that trying to contain this cultural spread would be like trying to stop a star from shining. The changes have reached a critical mass where they are self-sustaining and growing independently of any outside influence." Admiral, Parker realized they were facing a situation far beyond traditional diplomacy. Human culture had become a transformative force that was reshaping galactic civilization, whether the established powers wanted it or not. The question was no longer how to contain it, but how to manage a cultural revolution that was spreading across the stars faster than their fastest ships could travel. "Prepare a full briefing for the Global Council," Parker ordered. "We need to decide whether we are going to try to stop this or help guide it. Because ready or not, we have apparently started the galaxy's first cultural renaissance, and there is no going back." Commander Rick Thompson got a message from the Zephyrian homeworld that made him worried. The message was different from their usual careful and formal way of talking. This time their words sounded almost desperate and hungry for something. "Human ship Aurora, this is Ambassador Kethvar. We need to meet with you right away about the sound files from our last meeting. Our science people need more information for their studies." Thompson had taken over the ship after Jake Martinez got promoted to a bigger job. He looked at his science officer, Lieutenant Helen Davis, with confusion. The young woman had been reading all the reports from the first meeting with the aliens and found some very strange things. "Sir, Dr. Carter wrote that the Zephyrians have been trying to make human music using their math and number systems," Davis told him. "But their attempts only made what they called emotionally empty copies that did not work right." When the Aurora ship reached the Zephyrian homeworld, Thompson was shocked by what he saw. The space stations that were usually perfect and clean now had strange new things stuck to them. Crude sound-making devices were attached to the outside walls, and weird rhythm patterns were flashing through all the station lights. Ambassador Kethvar met them at the docking area, but he was not alone like before. Behind him stood many other Zephyrians, and their crystal bodies were moving slightly back and forth together in the same rhythm. Thompson found this very disturbing because he knew these aliens always followed very strict social rules about how to behave. "Welcome, Commander Thompson," Kethvar said, but his translation machine now had a musical quality to his voice. "We have been working with the human cultural files. The results have been very enlightening for us." As they walked through the station, Thompson saw something that had never happened in Zephyrian society before. Small groups of aliens had gathered in what looked like rough concerts, trying to copy human songs with their natural harmonic abilities. The sounds they made were strangely beautiful, but completely outside their traditional culture. Dr. Kate Wilson, the Aurora's new cultural specialist, recorded everything with growing amazement. "Commander, they have basically figured out how to express emotions through music by studying our examples. Look at this data." She showed him a computer pad with Zephyrian brain scans. The aliens' brain patterns had changed dramatically since they heard human music. Parts of their brains that had been sleeping for millions of years were now active, creating new pathways for creativity and emotional processing. "This is incredible," Wilson continued. "They are not just copying our music, they are developing their own emotional intelligence and learning how feelings work." But the changes went far beyond just music. The Zephyrians had started questioning their rigid social system, where everyone had to do the job their genes said they should do. Younger aliens were saying they wanted to try different jobs and explore new ideas. Some had even started making visual art, splashing colors on walls that had always been white and empty. Ambassador Kethvar led them to the station's main room, where a huge crowd of Zephyrians had gathered. In the center, one alien stood in front of a crude musical instrument, making sounds that mixed their natural crystal harmony abilities with human musical ideas. "We call this individual a performer," Kethvar explained, and the word sounded strange coming from his translator, because it was a completely new concept in their language. "This job did not exist in our society until 3 months ago." Commander Thompson felt scared as he realized what was happening. Human culture was not just being studied by the Zephyrians. It was fundamentally changing who they were as a species. The careful rules about sharing culture between different worlds had been completely overwhelmed by something much more powerful than anyone had expected. As the performance reached its highest point, hundreds of Zephyrians started singing together in harmony. Their voices created a sound that was not completely human and not entirely alien either. It was something new that had never existed in the galaxy before. Thompson knew he had to tell Earth Command about this immediately. Humans had apparently released something that was spreading through alien society like a virus. But instead of causing destruction, it was waking up something the aliens desperately wanted more of. The Zephyrian performer finished the song and the crowd made sounds that Thompson realized was their version of clapping and cheering. But these aliens had never cheered for anything before because their society did not have the concept of entertainment or performance art. "Ambassador Kethvar," Thompson said, "how are your leaders reacting to these changes?" Kethvar's crystal body dimmed slightly. "Our Council of Order is very concerned. They have ruled our people for thousands of years through careful control and predictable systems. Now our young people are asking questions about why things must always be the same, and whether there might be better ways to live." Dr. Wilson recorded more brain scans showing the scope of the changes. "Commander, we have identified at least 12 different art forms that did not exist 6 months ago. Poetry that includes mathematical equations, music that can only be understood by minds with multiple types of sensory input, visual art that exists in dimensions we cannot even see. The most remarkable thing was that the Zephyrians were starting to understand emotions not just as individual experiences, but as things that could be shared between people. They were developing what they called empathy bridges, ways to let other beings feel what they were feeling. The implications go far beyond art and music, Thompson realized. They are developing true understanding between different types of minds. A young Zephyrian approached them, moving with the new rhythmic patterns that had infected their species. Through a simple translator, she spoke in broken but enthusiastic human language. "Human music make us feel inside things we not know we have. Before we think feeling was error in thinking process. Now we understand feeling is different type of thinking that make life more full of meaning." Commander Thompson looked around at the hundreds of aliens who were experimenting with human cultural concepts and creating their own variations. They were not becoming less alien. They were becoming more fully themselves by discovering capabilities they never knew they had. As they prepared to leave the station, Ambassador Kethvar made a request that changed everything. "Commander Thompson, we want to share these cultural discoveries with the other species in our confederation. We believe they may also have sleeping capabilities that could be awakened through exposure to human creative expression." Thompson felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. What had started as an accident was about to become a deliberate transformation of galactic civilization. The question was no longer whether they could control the spread of human culture, but whether they should even try to stop something that was bringing so much growth and discovery to species that had been stagnant for millennia. Captain Jake Martinez looked out the big window of his ship Aurora and saw the alien ships coming closer. The ships looked like giant glass diamonds floating in space. They moved in perfect lines, never changing their path or speed. Jake had been waiting for this day for 3 years, since Earth first talked to these aliens called Zephyrians. Commander Lisa Brooks sat at her desk watching the computer screens that showed all the talking signals between the ships. The Zephyrians always said the same things in the same way every time they talked. They never used extra words or showed feelings in their voices. Their whole world worked like a big machine where everyone had a job and never changed it. "They want to come on our ship now," Brooks told Jake. "Ambassador Kethvar is ready to see our human things." Jake remembered what the bosses back on Earth had told him. The Zephyrians did not like messy things or surprises. They only liked things that followed rules and stayed the same. Their fun was watching math patterns in light shows and listening to sounds that followed number rules. They thought human stuff might be too wild and could cause problems. Dr. Amy Carter walked onto the control room carrying a computer pad with human things to show the aliens. The Earth leaders had picked very safe examples of human culture. They chose old music that followed strict rules, old paintings from hundreds of years ago, and movies about human science discoveries. They did not want to scare the aliens with anything too different. "Should we show them some newer human things?" Carter asked Jake with worry in her voice. The people who picked these things were very careful to avoid anything too exciting. Jake shook his shoulders up and down. "Orders are orders, Doctor. We do not want to make them upset on the first day." The alien visitors came onto the Aurora ship. They were tall like humans, but their bodies looked like they were made of clear crystal. Light moved through their bodies in patterns. They walked in perfect straight lines and never bumped into each other. Their leader, Ambassador Kethvar, had a machine that changed his crystal sounds into human words that had no feelings in them. "We are ready to look at your human cultural items, Captain Martinez. Our smart people think these things will not change our society much." The show started in the ship's big meeting room. The Zephyrians watched the old human music with polite interest. Their gem-like eyes glowed softly as their scanning machines recorded everything. They liked the math patterns in Bach's music, and how Beethoven built his songs with careful structure, but then something went wrong that nobody planned. Dr. Carter touched the wrong button on her computer pad by mistake. Instead of the safe old music, a loud guitar sound filled the room. Then a human voice started singing with raw emotion about wanting things, fighting against rules, and hoping for better days. The Zephyrians stopped moving completely. Their scanning machines started blinking very fast as they recorded every sound and every small change in the singer's voice. Ambassador Kethvar's usually steady voice started to shake a little when he spoke. What was that sound pattern? The math structure was messy and random, but it made our brains react in ways we have never felt before. Dr. Carter quickly turned off the music, her face turning red with shame. "I am sorry, Ambassador. That was a mistake. That song was not supposed to be part of our planned sharing. But it was too late to take it back." The Zephyrians had heard something their perfect world had never made. They had felt music that talked to emotions they did not even know they had inside them. When the alien group walked back to their ship, their perfect walking formation looked a little less stiff. Their movement seemed to have a small rhythm that was not there before. Captain Martinez watched them leave and felt worried. The careful rules for meeting new aliens suddenly seemed too weak for what had just happened. The simple rock song had done something to the Zephyrians that all their planning had not expected. Ambassador Kethvar stopped at the door before leaving. His crystal body was glowing in patterns Jake had not seen before. "Captain Martinez, we must discuss this musical accident with our leaders. The sonic patterns have created unexpected neural responses in our delegation members." After the aliens left, Dr. Carter sat down heavily in her chair. "Jake, I think we just changed everything. Did you see how they reacted? Their whole bodies started glowing differently after hearing that song." Commander Brooks pulled up the scan data from their meeting. "Look at this. Their brainwave patterns changed completely when the rock music played. The scanning equipment shows massive activity in parts of their brains that were totally quiet before." Jake looked at the data and felt a cold feeling in his stomach. Humans had been so worried about the aliens changing them that nobody had thought about humans changing the aliens. The Zephyrians had lived for thousands of years with perfect order and control. Now they had heard something that broke all their rules about how feelings and thoughts should work. "What do we tell Earth Command?" Carter asked. Jake stared out at the alien ships getting smaller in the distance. "We tell them the truth. We may have just started something we cannot stop." That music did not just entertain them. It woke something up inside them that has been sleeping for their entire history as a species. The communication system buzzed with an incoming message from the Zephyrian flagship. Ambassador Kethavar's voice came through. But now it had something new in it that sounded almost like excitement. "Human vessel Aurora. Our delegation requests additional cultural materials for further analysis. The sonic patterns have created unprecedented interest among our crew members. We will return with more observers tomorrow." Jake looked at his crew with growing concern. The careful first contact protocols had just been destroyed by 3 minutes of accidental rock music. Whatever happened next, the galaxy was about to become a very different place. Dr. Carl Johnson stood on the observation deck of the research station Harmony, watching as representatives from 47 different species gathered for what was being called the First Galactic Cultural Congress. What had begun as a crisis for the Confederation, leadership had evolved into something unprecedented, a voluntary alliance based on shared creative expression rather than political or military power. "The Confederation Council has officially condemned this gathering," reported Commander Beth Taylor, the station's diplomatic officer. "They are calling it a threat to galactic stability and have demanded that all species return to their homeworlds immediately." Johnson smiled as he watched the incredible scene below. Zephyrian musicians were teaching Mordak warriors how to express battle fury through harmonic resonance. Cathani philosophers were working with human poets to create logical verse that somehow conveyed pure emotion. Forthak engineers were building instruments that allowed species with completely different sensory capabilities to create music together. "How many of them are actually leaving?" Johnson asked. "None," Taylor replied with amazement. "In fact, we are getting more arrivals every hour. 3 new species that were not even part of the original Confederation have requested permission to attend." Dr. Susan Miller, the project's alien psychology expert, joined them on the observation deck. "Carl, you need to see this. We have documented the emergence of completely new forms of consciousness among the participants." She led them to the research laboratory, where brain scans from multiple species were displayed on holographic monitors. "Look at these neural patterns. The Zephyrians are developing emotional processing centers they never had before. The Mordak are growing new neural pathways for abstract thinking. The Cathani are actually developing intuitive reasoning capabilities." Johnson studied the scans with growing wonder. "They are not just learning our culture, they are evolving because of it." "It is mutual," Miller continued. "The human participants are developing enhanced sensory processing abilities and expanded emotional ranges. We are literally becoming more than we were through this cultural exchange." The sound of music drifted up from the main gathering hall, but it was unlike anything anyone had ever heard before. The composition incorporated harmonic structures from Zephyrian crystal resonance, rhythmic patterns from Mordak war chants, logical progressions from Cathani mathematical sequences, and emotional crescendos from human musical tradition. But it was more than just a combination. It was something entirely new that could only exist when all these different types of minds worked together. Commander Taylor received an urgent communication from Earth Command. "Dr. Johnson, I am getting reports that similar gatherings are spontaneously forming throughout Confederation space. The cultural movement has become completely decentralized. What is the Confederation Council's response?" Johnson asked. "They have declared martial law in their core systems," Taylor replied grimly. "However, their enforcement fleets are experiencing massive desertions. Apparently, even their military personnel have been exposed to the cultural materials and are refusing orders to suppress the gatherings." Dr. Miller highlighted additional data showing the scope of the changes. "We have identified 17 different art forms that did not exist 6 months ago. Poetry that incorporates mathematical equations. Music that can only be fully appreciated by minds with 4 different types of sensory input. Visual art that exists in 11 dimensions. The most remarkable development was the emergence of what participants were calling empathy bridges. These were technological interfaces that allowed different species to temporarily experience reality from another species' perspective. A human could experience the harmonic resonance that gave Zephyrians their emotional framework. A Mordak could understand the logical beauty that drove Cathani philosophy. A Kithani could feel the raw emotional intensity that fueled human creativity. The implications go far beyond art and music, Johnson realized. They are developing true interspecies understanding at a neurological level. Captain Alan Wright arrived with urgent news from the outer systems. Doctor, we have received a transmission from Ambassador Kethvar. The Confederation Council has agreed to negotiate, but they want to meet with Earth's leadership directly. What are their terms? Johnson asked. Wright's expression was grim. They want us to help them stop the cultural spread in exchange for formal diplomatic recognition and trade agreements. They are willing to offer substantial technological exchanges. Dr. Miller's response was immediate. We cannot stop it even if we wanted to. This is not something being imposed from outside anymore. The species are generating their own cultural evolution. They are creating new forms of expression that we could not have imagined. Johnson looked down at the gathering hall where hundreds of beings from dozens of species were collaborating on something that could only be described as living, art. They were creating not just music or poetry or visual displays, but new ways of thinking and feeling that transcended the limitations of any single species. A young Zephyrian named Velthara approached them. Her crystal body was glowing in patterns that shifted between traditional Zephyrian mathematical sequences and the new rhythmic patterns inspired by human culture. Through her translator, she spoke with excitement that would have been impossible for her species just months before. Dr. Johnson, we have discovered something wonderful. When we combine Zephyrian harmonic resonance with human emotional expression and Mordak rhythmic intensity, we create experiences that touch parts of consciousness that none of our species knew existed. She led them to a small group where a human musician named Tom Bradley was working with a Kithani philosopher called Logic Singer of Truth, and a Mordak warrior known as Rage Turned to Beauty. Together they had created an instrument that generated music in mathematical patterns while simultaneously producing emotional resonance and rhythmic complexity. Watch what happens when we play, Velthara said. The four beings began to perform together, each contributing their species' unique abilities to the creation. But something extraordinary happened. As they played, their different types of consciousness began to synchronize. The humans' creativity sparked new mathematical insights in the Kithani. The Kithani's logical structures gave shape to the Mordak's emotional intensity. The Mordak's passion energized the Zephyrians' harmonic abilities, and the Zephyrians' crystalline resonance amplified all of their combined efforts. Johnson watched in awe as the performers' brain scans showed their neural patterns beginning to mirror each other across species barriers. They were not losing their individual identity, but they were gaining access to cognitive capabilities that belonged to other species. Commander Taylor, send a message to Earth Command, Johnson decided. Tell them we need to completely rethink our approach. We are not dealing with a cultural exchange anymore. We are witnessing the birth of a new form of galactic civilization. The music from below reached a crescendo that seemed to resonate through the station's hull itself, as if the very structure was joining in the creative expression. Johnson realized that humanity had inadvertently become the catalyst for something that would change the galaxy forever. Dr. Miller showed him the latest data from their research. Carl, we are seeing the emergence of hybrid consciousness that retains species identity while gaining multi-species cognitive capabilities. They are not becoming less alien. They are becoming more completely themselves while also becoming something greater. As if to prove her point, the performance below concluded with a harmonic pattern that somehow expressed mathematical beauty, emotional truth, logical perfection, and rhythmic vitality all at the same time. The audience, composed of dozens of different species, responded with a form of appreciation that incorporated the approval methods of every species present. Simultaneously, Johnson knew they were witnessing something that would reshape the understanding of consciousness, creativity, and interspecies cooperation throughout the galaxy. The infection had evolved beyond anything they could have predicted, and the galaxy was indeed begging for more. President Margaret Anderson stood before the United Earth Assembly, addressing a joint session that included, for the first time in human history, representatives from 43 alien species. The Great Hall had been modified to accommodate beings with vastly different physical and sensory requirements, creating a space that was itself a work of interspecies artistic collaboration. 6 months ago, we feared we had created a crisis, Anderson began, her words translated into dozens of languages and sensory formats. Today we celebrate the birth of something unprecedented in galactic history, a true interspecies civilization, based not on conquest or commerce, but on shared creative expression and mutual understanding. Ambassador Kethvar, who now served as the first speaker for the Cultural Alliance, responded with harmonics that painted colors in the air for species that perceived sound as visual phenomena. President Anderson, the human gift of creative chaos has awakened capabilities we did not know we possessed. We are no longer the same species we were before our first encounter. Dr. Paul Brooks, now Director of Interspecies Cultural Development, presented the remarkable statistics of the transformation. In the past year, we have documented the emergence of over 300 new art forms, 47 new philosophical frameworks, and 17 new forms of interspecies communication. More importantly, we have seen a 96% reduction in interspecies conflicts throughout the Alliance. The old Confederation Council had dissolved 6 months earlier, not through war or revolution but through irrelevance, when their citizens could experience the perspectives and emotions of other species directly through cultural bridges. The fear-based politics that had maintained separation for millennia simply lost their power. Captain Donald Lewis reported on the expansion of the Alliance. We now have membership requests from species as far as the Andromeda satellite galaxies. The cultural materials are spreading faster than our fastest ships can travel. Independent alien groups are creating their own variations of human cultural concepts and sharing them across interstellar networks. The transformation had not been without challenges. Some species had experienced temporary social disruption as their rigid hierarchies dissolved. The Vorthak had struggled initially when their warrior culture encountered the concept of expressing conflict through art rather than violence. The Kethani had faced difficulties integrating emotional capabilities with their traditionally logical worldviews. But in every case, the result had been growth rather than destruction. Dr. Linda Clark, the Alliance's chief xenopsychologist, explained the neurological changes they had observed. We are seeing the emergence of what we are calling hybrid consciousness, beings who retain their species identity, while gaining the cognitive and emotional capabilities of others. They are not becoming less alien. They are becoming more completely themselves. The most remarkable development was what the Alliance members called the Great Symphony. This was a continuously evolving collaborative artwork that involved every member species. It existed simultaneously as music, visual art, literature, philosophy, and pure emotional experience. Each species contributed their unique perspective, and the result was something that transcended the sum of its parts. A young human named Lisa Chen, who had grown up during the cultural exchange, addressed the assembly. She spoke in a hybrid language that combined human words with Zephyrian harmonic undertones, Mordak rhythmic emphasis, and Kethani logical structure. Her speech was simultaneously understood by every species present, even though she used concepts that had not existed in any single language before the Alliance. Honored beings of all species, we represent the first generation to grow up trilingual in our native communication, human cultural concepts, and the new hybrid forms of expression. We see the galaxy not as a collection of separate civilizations, but as a single, diverse community exploring the infinite possibilities of conscious experience. Young beings from dozens of species were indeed growing up with capabilities their parents could never have imagined. They could think in mathematical harmonies like Zephyrians, feel emotional depth like humans, process logical beauty like Kethani, and express intensity like Mordak, all while maintaining their core species identity. President Anderson continued her address by describing the practical benefits of the Alliance. Interspecies cooperation has led to technological breakthroughs that no single species could have achieved. Zephyrian crystal technology, combined with human creativity and Kethani logic, has produced energy systems that are both efficient and aesthetically beautiful. Mordak engineering enhanced with multi-species perspectives has created architecture that serves the needs of dozens of different biological forms simultaneously. The economic benefits were equally impressive. Trade between alliance species had increased by over 400%, as cultural understanding eliminated the mistrust and miscommunication that had previously hindered commerce. More importantly, the alliance had developed new concepts of value that went beyond material exchange to include cultural contribution and creative collaboration. Ambassador Kethvar addressed the assembly with a presentation that demonstrated the evolution of Zephyrian society. Before contact with human culture, our species functioned with perfect efficiency but experienced no joy in our existence. We have learned that efficiency without meaning is ultimately empty. The chaos and unpredictability that we once feared has given us access to experiences that make existence worth living. Dr. Brooks activated the Great Chamber's cultural interface system. Suddenly, every being present could experience the perspectives of every other being simultaneously. Humans felt the crystalline resonance of Zephyrian emotion, the logical beauty of Kethani thought, the rhythmic intensity of Mordak passion, and dozens of other sensory and cognitive experiences that had previously been impossible to share. The assembly erupted in what could only be called a spontaneous celebration, but it was celebration that incorporated the expression methods of 43 different species simultaneously. The sound was indescribable, the visual display was beyond comprehension, and the emotional impact was overwhelming. Yet every being present understood it perfectly, because they had learned to think and feel in multiple species frameworks. President Anderson concluded her address with words that had become the Alliance's motto. Humanity gave the galaxy chaos, and together we learned to make it sing. We have created something that no single species could have imagined. The galaxy is no longer silent, and it never will be again. As the session concluded, reports arrived of new species requesting to join the Alliance daily. The cultural revolution that had begun with an accidental music file had become the foundation for a new form of galactic civilization. Species that had been isolated in their own rigid systems for millions of years were now part of a growing community that celebrated diversity while creating unity through shared creative expression. The most remarkable thing was that this new civilization was still growing and evolving. Every day brought new art forms, new ways of thinking, and new possibilities for conscious experience. The infection had spread to every corner of known space, and the galaxy was indeed begging for more. Not as subjects or allies, but as partners in the greatest creative collaboration in cosmic history. A final message arrived from the edge of known space. An unknown species had detected the cultural transmissions and requested contact. Their message was simple but profound. We have heard your galactic symphony. We wish to add our voice to the song. The Alliance had become a beacon that attracted conscious beings from across the universe, all drawn by the promise of growth, creativity, and the chance to become more than they had ever been alone. Humanity's accidental gift to the galaxy had become the foundation for a new type of civilization that would continue expanding and evolving for generations to come.